Dr. Jessica Lake is the Chief Science Officer at Limbix, where she is responsible for strategic scientific leadership and oversees evidence-based and data-driven input into Limbix product development and business decisions. She's a cognitive and behavioral scientist by training, having received her PhD in psychology and neuroscience from Duke University and completed a translational psychology doctoral fellowship at UCLA. She has served as principal investigator for Limbix clinical trials evaluating the safety and effectiveness of SPAR-RX. Dr. Jessica Lake will give her talk on building engaging and clinically effective digital therapeutics. Let us all welcome Dr. Jessica Lake.
Hi there, thanks so much for having me. If you give me a second, I will share my screen. Okay, can you see that all right?
Yes.
Perfect. Oh, let me see, head back to my title slide there. Okay, so happy to be here today and looking forward to talking to you about the ways at Limbix that we are building engaging and clinically effective digital therapeutics. You know, we've heard about how digital therapeutics, like other medical devices, can go through a regulatory pathway and how getting the clinical efficacy data and safety data are really important for demonstrating effectiveness of our products. But I think what's also really important for digital tools like digital therapeutics is that they be engaging so that our users will use them. So that's what I'm going to be speaking about today. If you're not familiar with Limbix, Limbix is focused specifically on developing digital therapeutics for adolescent mental health disorders. And our first app that I'll be talking about today is specifically focused on adolescent depression. And our mission is really centered around improving access to effective mental health care through technology. And the motivation here is that we see that there's this real gap in access to effective mental health care, both in the United States and abroad. Looking at the United States populations in terms of adolescent depression, there's a prevalence of around 19% in the adolescent population of depression, and the numbers look very similar in Korea. And so I think what's important is that we're looking to solve this access problem that can be driven by both a lack of professionals to meet the demands that we see in terms of prevalence of disorders, and then also other factors that serve as barriers to accessing effective mental health care. And often that is things such as stigma that's associated still with mental illness that prevent people from accessing care. And so this is an area that we really see that digital therapeutics can play an important role in overcoming some of those barriers that we see in accessing effective healthcare. So as I mentioned, our flagship product is called SPARK-RX, and it's for adolescent depression. And similarly to the presentation you just heard, our app is also based on cognitive behavioral therapy, which is an evidence-based approach that's been demonstrated to be effective in treating symptoms of depression. And specifically, SPARK focuses on the B in CBT, so the behavioral components, where we're really looking to teach the skills to schedule and complete activities that are aligned with our users' values that will lead to the reduction of depression symptoms. So these are activities that bring about a sense of pleasure or mastery. And that's really the mechanism of action that we see being most impactful in driving symptom change. And you can see some of the other components of our app listed here as well. Earlier we had heard a great presentation about the regulatory pathway. And I think in the tech world, some of these regulations can be perceived as being a barrier to your standard tech development process, where you're looking to iterate rapidly and develop products that are engaging. But what we like to think at Limbix is that these regulations are there for what they're designed for, which is to protect patients and ensure safety of the products that we're building. And so we don't want to think about these regulations as barriers, and we don't want to certainly go around them, but we really like to think of the regulations as a tunnel in this metaphor here that we can go through while still being able to build effective products that are engaging as well. And so what I want to speak to you about is that today, how we sort of combine those two processes within the context of our product development process to ensure we're building engaging products and that they are efficacious. And so when I speak about the product development process, I'll be referring to this framework called the Double Diamond Framework, where product development is split into a phase of discovery and definition, where we're looking to make sure that we're designing the right products. And then a second stage where we are building and testing to ensure that we've designed things right. And so I'll be speaking to 4 different strategies that we leverage at Limbix to, again, make sure that we are building products that are both efficacious as well as engaging for our users. And so first I'll speak to the importance of clinical subject matter experts and behavioral subject matter experts as well. So this is really table stakes for us that we include clinical and behavioral experts into the development of our products to ensure that they are clinically impactful. And so I'll speak to specifically 3 different areas in which we look to incorporate the input of clinical SMEs. And the first is at that early design phase, when we're thinking about how to build out these digital apps, we really look to existing treatment protocols, usually from face-to-face therapy. And our clinical subject matter experts are really impactful in looking at these, bringing these treatment protocols to the conversation and really extracting for us what are the sort of mechanisms of action or important core ingredients of those protocols that lead to clinical benefit, and working with our products teams to extract those elements from those face-to-face treatment protocols and bringing them into a digital experience. So it's not a direct one-to-one translation, but it's really an adaptation of those core important areas to ensure that they are still impactful in a digital format, but they're translated in a way that makes more sense in these sort of digital experiences, which are often self-guided. Secondly, what we're looking to our clinical subject matter experts for is ensuring safety. And that is important within the context of both designing our app, so ensuring that we have safety features within the app itself that are geared towards ensuring safety, as well as building out safety protocols within the context of the testing that we conduct to ensure that our users are always safe in using our products. And finally, I think the input of our clinical and behavioral subject matter experts is really impactful in contextualizing the information that we get from the app itself. And so that's both the clinical data, but as well as the quantitative and qualitative data that we get in terms of data analytics from the app, as well as qualitative information we get from users. And so I think that clinical input can be really impactful in generating insights about what these different data patterns mean and how we can leverage them to feed back into our product development process to continue to develop apps that build on engagement features and continue to build the efficacy of our product for all users. Just as important to us as incorporating the input of clinical subject matter experts is incorporating the voices of the users themselves. In terms of the patient population at Limbix, none of us are adolescents, so it's really important that we incorporate the voices of our users to make sure that our products are engaging. Otherwise, they can't be clinically effective if people aren't using them. And so the first way that we do that across the product development process is to build out at Limbix a teen advisory council. So these are adolescents who have lived experience with the mental health disorders that we're targeting. And they work with us in collaboration with our product team to co-design features that we build into the app. And then they test those features as well to ensure that they're usable and work as intended and really, speak to what it means to be a teenager today. So an example of how we've incorporated that that I'll share with you is what I'm showing you on the left is a screen that represents a feature that we added into the app with our clinical subject matter experts. It's a safety feature. In our app, participants have the opportunity to enter free-form text, and we have an algorithm that will pop up this little pop-up that you're seeing here. If a patient were to enter information that we perceived as potentially indicating that there was a safety or clinical concern. And so we worked with teens to get their input on this feature. And from those sessions, we learned from them that they really had a concern over who was in this pop-up and the implementation of this feature, they really wanted to understand who was seeing their information and how we were sharing it, and if we were sharing it with their parent or with their doctor. And so that was something that we iterated on to improve the language here that really helped our users feel comfortable with using the app and continuing to enter information in a safe way. Another example of how we have incorporated user research into our product development process and done that iteratively, I think in a unique way, even in the context of the clinical trials that we're running, is shown here. And so what I'm showing you is a timeline of a study that we conducted. It was a phase study where there was first a feasibility stage trial, followed by a larger randomized controlled trial. And we took advantage of the fact that we had these users going through our program in the context of the clinical trial to get their input on the user experience of our digital therapeutic. And so we conducted a number of user interviews with those participants, and using that information coupled with the data analytics that we were collecting in this particular study, we arrived at the insight that there was some need to improve engagement within the app to continue to engage our users. And so to demonstrate sort of this iterative process, we then worked with the Teen Advisory Council to co-design additional features to address this need, as well as tested those features with that patient population. And that resulted in the addition of a reward system within the context of the app, as well as additional animations to increase engagement. We incorporated that into the second phase of this clinical trial, and then again conducted user interviews to get additional feedback afterwards on the success of that implementation. And so I think this is just a nice illustration of how, even within the context of a clinical trial and a regulated process, we can still iterate on our product development during early stage clinical trials to speed product development while still getting these early indicators of efficacy. So we can achieve both that aim of building effective digital therapeutics as well as engaging products. Next, going back to the idea of clinical testing, I think one of the things that digital therapeutics in particular afford us the opportunity for is conducting decentralized clinical trials. This is something that's more widely becoming the norm across a number of different industries, outside of digital health as well, into medical devices and drug testing. But I think, digital therapeutics in general are uniquely positioned to leverage decentralized clinical trials. And one of the things that we've been able to do at Limbix is really take advantage of this to, especially within the context of early stage clinical trials, develop the infrastructure and operations internally to our company to be able to conduct these trials ourselves. And I think this sort of speaks to one of the things that's an advantage of digital therapeutics, which is that they can be more easily scaled, and building out this infrastructure internally has been financially cost saving to Limbix in the long run. There are really great external contract research organizations that you can work with to conduct clinical trials, and we do that at Limbix as well. But for these early stage trials, I think it affords us a lot more flexibility and control over our own timelines to be able to get these early indicators of efficacy by building out the infrastructure that seamlessly integrates with our own app and infrastructure to be able to conduct these trials rapidly internally. And lastly, just sort of build on this idea and sort of the importance for us at Limbix to be able to incorporate this testing internally is how we are able to conduct iterative product development within the context of these early stage clinical trials. So I'm showing you that same study timeline here that I showed you earlier of this 2-phase clinical trial. And what I'm now showing you below that are the updates to the product that we incorporated into the study. So there were actually 3 different versions of the app that we incorporated into this clinical trial. And so those were planned a priori. So we determined in advance after how many participants we were going to include an update to the app. And so we were able to incorporate different updates to the application that we were building based on user feedback and based on data analytics and other input from our subject matter experts into the context of this trial to get an early indicator of efficacy of our product while not slowing our product development process. And what that afforded us the opportunity for is to do different types of benchmarking as well to track our patient progress in terms of engagement over time, in addition to clinical outcomes. And so what I'm showing you on the left is an engagement metric of median daily active users who are using our app over the course of these updates to the product. And so we can use our own prior versions to track changes in these metrics over time to see if successive updates to the app are increasing engagement and increasing efficacy, as well as comparing our own data benchmarked against, published norms in the literature. And, if not more important, at least equally important, what we think about at Limbix is not just engagement, general measures of engagement, but really thinking about meaningful measures of engagement. You can think of them as sort of active ingredients, if you will, of the digital program. And this is also the sort of benchmarking and product updates within the context of clinical trials has afforded us the opportunity to look at changes in these meaningful engagements over time. So what I'm showing you here on the right is a measure of the number of behavioral activations completed in the app. So these are activities that patients scheduled and then reported that they completed in the app. And that's something that we think to be a core ingredient to driving meaningful engagement and driving clinical efficacy of our program. And so we've been able to track that with these product updates too, and then look at the relationship with outcomes as well. And so all of the things that I've walked you through so far really speak to how we can, in the context of a regulated space, still build products that are efficacious, but also ensure that we're building them for our target audience in a way that is engaging for our users. And so the way that we've been able to do that in a way that is both scalable and sort of time efficient, I've sort of walked you through in this process. And before I end, I just want to speak to one last point. I don't speak or read Korean, but I'm told that by Google Translate that what I'm showing you is a news article about a recent announcement of a partnership between Limbix and Bixink Therapeutic to bring our product Spark to the Korean market. And the point that I really just want to make is that with this product development process that I've walked you through, we would intend to go through many of these same steps in the Korean market to ensure we're including subject matter experts and Korean users to ensure that we're bringing a product to market that speaks to Koreans and really works for the Korean adolescent population with depression. But this is an infinitely sort of scalable model that we can build out and conduct rapid testing to allow us to bring products to market in a time efficient manner. And so with that, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your time.